Hello, everyone. We're back.
Oh, indeed, indeed. After a restful summer vacation. Oh man, oh man, oh man, Shevitz. And look, everyone is in their late 19th, early 20th century swimming gear. I mean, that guy has that funny thing with the shirt and all that, and the girl, you see, she's got like that sort of dress kind of thing, or bloomers or whatever they are.
Yeah.
I love the way our patrons try to bring back these old styles from time to time. And this could be Lake Saranac, 1910, what I'm seeing right now.
Where does Lake Saranac?
In the Adirondacks. Where else?
Is that Oh.
In New York, upstate.
Oh, okay. I thought it was the Appalachians.
No. Although the Alleghenies, the Adirondacks, I guess, are part of the Appalachians, sort of, kind of, in a way. But no, it's really quite amazing. And in fact, the Adirondacks, as we speak, are between you and me.
That's true.
Yeah, because you're sitting in the LA area, and I'm in Austria. So the Adirondacks and the fabulous Hudson Valley, to say nothing of New Jersey, are, they're between us.
Yeah.
They're the bridge between us.
The bridge, yes.
That pulls us together.
Well, that's taking liberties.
Well, I mean, it's the land of liberty. It's not the land of Lincoln, that's Illinois, but that's also between us. Actually, we have about 6,000 miles between us. Isn't that something?
That is.
And through the wonders of modern technology, we're able to do this and present this show when we're not on vacation, and the inmates of the Tumbler House Tower aren't estimating.
Inmates, really? Is that what we're gonna do?
Look, all I'm saying is that when I reported for the pre-show to get all the equipment going and so on, I noticed that people were still pulling gunk out of their hair and off their clothing. Because the employees had all estimated while you and the staff were, the management were all vacationing. And I never knew people could estimate like that. That's really amazing.
That is really amazing. This reminds me of a great comment. I don't know if this gentleman is a patron or not. But it was very... Here we go. Davy Morales. I love how Charles is a continent away on the other side of the ocean and still keeps up the Tumbler Tower grapevine bit.
Well, that's a very good question as to how we work that. And it's amazing. It's amazing, really, because they keep me informed. They call and they talk to me. Tyrone, in particular, calls me a lot, and so does Lydia. Actually, they all do from time to time. But during the summer, they were all estimating, so I didn't hear from anybody until the past few days, and they started coming out of their various cocoons and closets and reemerging like butterflies, drying their wings and stuff like that.
What imagery!
Well, I don't know. It all seems very strange, but we're back in the saddle again, and it's been an interesting summer since last we convened.
Absolutely. There's you've been gone a long time. There's a lot you missed out on.
Oh.
I don't know if I should say this for the full episode. I'm going to treat our patrons. Our patrons have been waiting for so long. It's not. We kind of got into scrape. Well, not we got into scrape. The Manicottis were really running wild over the summer.
Really?
Really running wild.
Oh, those Manicottis.
They were killing a lot of people. Friends of yours, friends of mine. And it was really a mess. It was really ugly. It was really ugly, honestly. And so, but I mean, sometimes our friends were able to fight back and defend themselves in heroic fashion, and that was kind of made the headlines on some of the newspapers. But no,
That manicotti, I'll tell you.
we needed to enforce the rule of law. We needed to, and so Officer Clancy got involved. You know, I mean,
Neighborhood watch.
and so what we decided is, I said, look, Clancy, we need to put this to bed. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to meet. I'll intervene for all our friends. Let's have a place to meet. You know, let's get a nice, quiet Italian restaurant.
You sat down with Don Julio, Don Julio Manicotti?
It's not a sit down. It's just a casual dinner at an Italian-American restaurant. So anyhow, it was a perfect place. Everybody minds their own business. They keep themselves. It's perfect. So anyhow, we were discussing business. I get up to go to the restroom. You're not going to believe this, okay? But this really happened. A lone gunman comes in, shoots down Boss Manicotti. Officer Clancy takes a bullet himself. I get back. It's unbelievable. So what happened? So obviously we have to find who killed Boss Manicotti, right? I mean, we got a physical description of sort of this African American, Asian American guy with a cowboy hat. So we kind of went that lead, and
every witness had a different account.
So yeah, and so.
And Officer Clancy's
Officer Clancy. Well, hold up there, Charles. Yes, so Officer Clancy, being so involved, being a sort of a mediator, decided to be the detective on this. Ends up getting a prime suspect, puts him in prison. Wouldn't you know, that gentleman hangs himself in prison?
I don't believe it.
But anyhow, there was obviously, everybody agrees, top-rate detective work from Officer Clancy. And believe it or not, Officer Clancy isn't Officer Clancy anymore. He's Chief of Police Clancy. Because he's a hero. I mean, if you think about it, he took a bullet and then he finds the assassin.
Well, this makes sense because, I got a postcard from him in Bermuda, 2 days ago. So I guess he's recuperating. It all makes sense now. Well, those Manicottis, I feel badly for them. Don Julio, despite what they said, he had a terrible reputation, and I hadn't known he was deceased. This must have happened fairly recently. I had no idea that Don Julio was no longer amongst us. We had our differences down through the years.
Yeah.
All right, I'd be the first to admit this.
Yeah.
But, he was kind to his dog. He was a great coin collector. He was a real loss to the industry, to the community. I think that Don Julio in his life summed up what so many of us have tried to put our fingers on in this wild place we call Southern California. And I like so many of us who came out from New York back decades ago, it was a tough transition. You know what I mean? And he did his best to keep the old traditions alive while adjusting to the new realities. And I just, what a loss. Squirt, squirt, squirt.
Yeah.
If I had known, I'd be wearing black. Pity I didn't find out till it was too late.
Yeah.
But there's a silver lining in everything. One of them being that his three boys don't have the brains between them that God gave an eel. So I think things will be a lot simpler now. And it's also going to be a lot easier with Clancy as chief of police if he can keep the job.
Crime is at an all-time low. I mean, there's hardly any reports anywhere. I mean, everything is
sealed out. Well, it's funny. It's funny you mention this because you heard what happened in Missouri. the speaking of law enforcement in today's modern world, the Attorney General of the state of Missouri declared that they would not cooperate with the FBI in surrendering lists of firearms owners.
Wow.
And that's actually quite true. Thinking of Officer Clancy as chief of police made me think of it, because I could imagine that also purely for the sake of personal freedom, he would take a stand against collaborating with the feds, dirty feds. Uh, but and what's sad about this, and now I'm not kidding at all. What's sad for me to see what the FBI have become is that my uncle, by marriage, my dad's father-in-law, was a G-man, and he knew J. Edgar Hoover, and he was he had been special agent in charge of Kentucky and then special agent in charge of Southern Ohio when he retired. And in those days, the FBI walked on water.
Yeah.
And to see them turned into this racket. But I mean, how do I put this? On the one hand, the Tory in me says, "What do you think would happen?" But the kid who grew up in the United States in me is horrified to see this.
Well, you say racket, that reminds me honestly of sort of the news that you told me about the IRS hiring 87,000 people because there's just so many
87,000 new agents.
to audit. I mean, to me, that sounds like a racket to me.
Well,
I
it's a
mean,
cross between a racket and an army of occupation.
yeah, yeah,
It feels very much like the government is being weaponized against its subjects.
yeah.
And take that number of people. Imagine 87,000 added to the armed forces, or 87,000 added to the border, or 87,000 added to law enforcement on some sort of anti-drug or anti-racketeering campaign. That would represent a substantial investment, either for national defense or border security or anti-racketeering or whatever. But 87,000 IRS agents will be used on the people of the United States of America. IRS agents do not go after foreign criminals. And I was talking recently with a what do you call him, a financial planner
Yeah.
fellow, and he made the interesting comment that in recent years, and mind you, he's got some high-end clients, but most of them are solidly middle class. He usually had to deal with one IRS audit a year.
Hmm.
The past couple of years, it's averaged 3. And that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Because they are out to squeeze the pips. They're spending money right and left. They can only print up so much, so they've got to pull the rest of it out of their property, us.
Pretty disconcerting.
Well,
Fortunately,
if all I can say is, and usually I'm not one of these people, in fact, I'm never one of these people to say all we need to do is vote the right way and everything will be fine. I don't believe that, never have. But I do believe these coming congressional elections are very, very important.
hmm.
The Democrats have to be broken out of the House. There's no way this can continue.
Yeah.
Well, I lie. It can continue. Just look at Guatemala or Honduras.
At St. Andrews, they had this. It was insane. They had this young Slavic, good-looking priest there, and he's a Vincentian priest. And the LA Archdiocese is doing a really cool thing. They're bringing in priests from missionaries who are in really tough places, and they get to do a sermon and second collection for them.
Oh,
But I mean, this guy could hardly speak any English. He actually accidentally got called in because there's an African priest who was supposed to do mass, but he couldn't, so he filled in quickly. But I don't think people know how bad Honduras is. Like, he was explaining the situation. Like, one of the things he said is, "Oh yeah, our president right now is actually in prison in New York."
yeah.
But I remember looking at Honduras at the longevity and sort of being shocked because like the longevity was something like 54 or something like that. And
Yeah.
I was like, wow. So
Well,
anyhow, I was just amazed at this priest because I felt like he chose to go there.
huh.
Like, and that is like, I felt like unbelievably heroic. So I gave him all the money in my wallet because I felt
Well,
like that's a saint right there.
well,
Um,
again, the irony, the sadness is so many of these failed countries have the most extraordinarily wonderful people,
mm,
but that doesn't help
mm,
when you have a corrupt and stupid ruling class.
yeah.
Everything goes down the tubes, kind of like us. So, anyhow.
I still like to believe though that what's really happening and what really matters is not the news headlines. It's sort of kind of as Pope Benedict had said. It's the motif of the church is the mustard seed of the Holy Family, where it's this tiny little, seemingly insignificant thing that blossoms and blooms into this incredible thing, and that's
Oh,
always sort of been the way. Maybe it's naive for me to say that, but I
no,
am
no,
sticking to
I
that.
I believe that too. It's just that you have the two realities at once.
Yeah.
Uh, our Lord and his apostles were wandering around Palestine when it had some of the worst rulers imaginable,
Hmm.
and both these things were true. If you had been with our Lord and the little group of people around him, you would have seen. Oh, hello, there's my camera. You would have seen some amazing things, but at the same time, there was still all sorts of misgovernment going on in Galilee and Perea and all that. So the best of times and the worst of times.
Hmm.
But anyway, the patrons, I'm sure, have come to have questions
Absolutely.
answered.
Absolutely. So here we
Let's
go.
give them some of what they want.
All right. We have a bunch of stuff from Connor. So he says, it suddenly hit me as you're singing Billy Joel that we need to switch to a summertime mentality in music. People want to think about the sunshine and the beaches, the exotic locales. To that end, I propose a summer lightning round of vacation destinations. Charles needs to say if he's been there and something neat to see there. Ready.
All right, I'm ready.
All right. Number one, Aruba.
No.
Oh, okay. So you haven't been there. Is there something neat to see there that you know offhand?
Oh yeah. The church, the fort, the governor's palace in Oranjestad, the capital. Uh, Aruba is interesting. It's mostly a Catholic island, and a lot of the inhabitants are, which is rare in the West Indies, are descendants of the original Arawak Indians.
Hmm.
It's
Okay.
a Dutch island.
Jamaica.
No, lots of important and interesting things to see there, though. The forts at Port Royal, Kingston itself, the capital, has all sorts of historic buildings. King's House, where the Governor General, the representative of the Queen, lives. And of course, there are the resorts that people love to go to, Montego Bay and that kind of stuff. The cockpit country where the Maroons hide out, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
Interesting place.
Bermuda.
No. And here again, Hamilton has the beautiful fort, the King's House, again, where the governor lives. There's a northern island, St. David's Island, I think it's called, or in St. David's Parish in northern Bermuda. The people who are descendants of Wampanoag Indians brought there after King Philip's War in the 1600s. Very interesting culture, English speaking, still a British colony.
So Bermuda's actually an island?
Yes.
Wow. All right. The Bahamas.
Yes. I have been there. Nassau, Government House, Great Cliff, wonderful restaurant. Merv Griffin's Paradise Island Resort. It's no longer Merv Griffin's, of course, it belongs to somebody else, but it was. A really, really interesting place, Nassau. 3 forts, Fort Fincastle, Fort James, I think. Beautiful Catholic cathedral, beautiful Anglican cathedral. Well worth going to.
Okay, so I just looked up Bermuda. Bermuda's way out in the Atlantic.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought, isn't the Bermuda Triangle either in the Caribbean or Gulf of Mexico? Where's the Bermuda Triangle?
It's in the Atlantic.
Oh, is it?
Bermuda is one of the corners.
Oh, okay. I had a total false impression of that. Okay.
You thought Bermuda was south of San Bernardino.
South of San Bernardino. No, that's okay.
That's
all right.
the Salton Sea. That's not Bermuda.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Darn. Key Largo.
Oh yes.
I know where that is. Yeah.
I've been there. And Key Largo, the Key Largo Hotel. But my favorite eatery, not too far from there, is further down the Keys, a place called Isla Morada. And that is Sid and Roxy's Green Turtle Inn. But Key Largo is a wonderful place.
I'm most keen on that. I just the way that it looks so cool. With I guess the one highway going through all those.
Yeah, Highway 1 goes all the way down to Key West.
That's amazing to me.
I love the Keys. I really love the Keys.
Montego.
Well, that's in Jamaica. The answer is no. And a lot of eateries and tourist stuff. And, of course, that's where Tom Cruise filmed Cocktail. Part of it, anyway.
Florida Keys.
Well, we've just touched on them, but yes. Isla Morada. When you get to Key West, there's good news and bad news. Good news is, the bad news, rather, is that Key West is West Hollywood on the sea. That's the bad news. Good news is that it was settled by Loyalist descendants who had come to the Bahamas after the Revolution. They called them conchs. And they settled the Keys under the mistaken idea that these were more Bahamas. Because you can imagine them going to the little islands of the Bahamas by boat and then going over to the Keys. And the old conch families are still related to Bahamian families. Our Lady Star of the Sea is the great Catholic church there. Beautiful, beautiful place. The Siboney, great Cuban restaurant. The Villa, Mar-a-Lago, I guess, is the name of the old hotel. It's quite nice. The Turtle Crawls, Sloppy Joe's Bar, the Green Parrot, the St. Peter's, I think, Episcopal Church is right on Duval Street in the middle of town. Beautiful church. And Mallory Square at the very end of the island is where you can have one of the most amazing sunsets you've ever seen. And everybody gathers there at Mallory Square. It wasn't quite so overwhelmingly alternative 30 years ago. It still was, but not the way it's become. And the graveyard is interesting. The crew of the Maine, the fellows who were killed on the USS Maine, 1898, they're in the graveyard there. So Key West and the Keys in general, as I say, Sid and Roxy's, conch chowder, conch fritters, turtle soup, good stuff.
All right, Martinique.
Martinique, no, French island. That's Fort-de-France. That's where Saint-Pierre, that was destroyed by Montpellier, is. Uh, it's a bit of France in the Caribbean. Uh, the Carnival is big, and also Mid-Lent, Mi-Carême.
Hmm.
So you can go and practice your French, lay on the beach, drink French rum.
Montserrat.
Montserrat. It's
Montserrat.
in English island. No, I've not been there. Settled heavily by the Irish, believe it or not.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, 2/3 of it was wrecked by a volcano about 20 or 30 years ago. So there's only about a third of it that's inhabitable now. But that in itself is interesting to see. And as you might imagine, because of the Irish influence, St. Patrick's Day is big there.
Hmm. Port-au-Prince.
Port-au-Prince. No, that's the capital of Haiti. It's kind of a hellhole right now. But if you make it there, the cathedral, the Palais de la République are worth seeing. And also you want to go out of the city, up into the hills to Pétionville and Kensakoff, which are well-to-do suburbs with beautiful churches and all that, and lovely restaurants and cafes. The north of the island is now called Cap Haitien, once Cap Français, very colonial and in better shape than Port-au-Prince.
And finally, Kokomo.
I've only been there with the Beach Boys.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Impromptu question from me. Why is Haiti and the Dominican Republic, why are they so poor? Is it because of poor government?
Yeah. They're originally, of course, Haiti was settled by the French, and the Dominican Republic, Santo Domingo, by the Spanish. They were both sugar islands, heavily run by slaves. In 1792, after the monarchy was overthrown in France, there was a slave rebellion in Haiti. And interestingly, the first leader of the rebellion was a man named Toussaint Louverture, who was both a royalist, loyal to Louis XVI, and he was rebelling against the revolutionary government. Very devout Catholic, and of course was not what you would call a friend of slavery, being a slave himself. There was a terrible slaughter in Haiti. And eventually, some regimes later, they expelled almost all the white Haitians from Haiti. And they went on to settle places like Louisiana and parts of Trinidad and Cuba. Santo Domingo then was conquered by Haiti. And they dominated the island for quite a while. But then the Dominicans revolted and won their independence back, I think, in the 1830s or something. And the island settled down to being what it is now, an almost all black republic in Haiti and mixed in Santo Domingo. And very disliking one another. But they both had awful governments from that time down to the present. The fact that the part of the problem with both countries is that we've always interfered in their affairs as much as we possibly could, and that often hasn't borne really good fruit. But there's also the fact that since independence, I mean, what I'm going to say is going to sound heretical, but there are very few, if any, countries that have really profited by becoming independent in the colonial world. They just haven't. And, you can say that's terrible. You can say it's mean. You can say I'm being racist. You can say whatever you like. But the fact is that independence is not done very well by most of the countries who've received it.
What about India?
Same. I mean, India, their problems are enormous, to say nothing of the ongoing persecution of Christians there and the ongoing bloodshedding with the Muslims in Pakistan.
Well, what about, at least, I mean, like economically, right? They're part of BRIC, Brazil, Russia, India, China.
Yeah, all of which are countries where the top tier does well and nobody else does all that great.
I see.
I mean, it's great if you live in Shanghai or you live in Mumbai or you live in Moscow. It's not so much fun if you live in Krasnoyarsk or Hutin or any village you want in India.
Well, they're quote unquote developing nations, right? I mean, isn't that the case of
Yeah,
developing nations in general?
it's funny how developing nations never seem to develop.
Okay.
They never seem to arrive. I mean, the fact of the matter is that decolonization, and we can start with us in 1776, has really not been, for most of the people in any of those countries, been a beneficial process. We have this superstition that oppression is great as long as it's done by your own nationality. If you're ruled by somebody else and that rule is better than what your own people do, it doesn't matter. It's better for you to be beaten to a pulp by your own people than governed well by foreigners.
That's very true. Why do you think that is? Is that just part of the human
Yeah,
brain?
yeah. I mean, we're stupid. Human beings are pretty stupid, but also beyond that, the attack on colonialism is very much linked with the attack on Christianity, because of course outside of Europe, Christianity was brought by European colonialists. So obviously, because we know Christianity is evil, those who brought it must be evil. And I would feel a lot more sympathy for those arguments if the people who made them would stop using Western technology and Western European languages and Western European medicine and Western European food and Western European everything. Basically, one should sit in the mud and, just hang out.
Hmm.
Enjoy the yellow fever when it hits you.
Okay, moving on.
Was that Eurocentric? Was that Eurocentric?
All right, Connor says we need to acknowledge a pillar of summertime music, the great Jimmy Buffett. His wonderful lyrics are prophetic for both our current situation this summer and for this wonderful show. Quote, it's these changes in latitudes, changes in attitudes. Nothing remains quite the same. With all of our running and all of our cunning, if we couldn't laugh, we would all go insane. Wow, that's dead on, huh?
Can't argue with that.
So Connor says, my question for you both is, do either of you have a favorite Jimmy Buffett song? And was he the first artist to create the tropical escapism style of music? Or were there others before him? Ooh.
Well, Margaritaville for me. What do you say?
Oh yeah, I mean definitely Margaritaville for me. I mean, I guess if second place, I guess Cheeseburger in Paradise.
That's kind of a frightening visual, but never mind. Well, yeah. I mean, of course, we mentioned the Beach Boys and Kokomo.
Yeah.
It.
I don't know if there is that. I mean, is that escapism though? I mean.
Oh yeah.
I mean, tropical.
Bermuda, Bahama, yeah.
No, I mean,
Tropical.
I meant the Beach Boys in general.
No, but I'm saying Kokomo
oh, yeah.
specifically. And then, of course, there were, sure, see the pyramids along the Nile. Watch the sunrise on some tropic isle. But remember, darling, all the while you belong to me. And, I mean, all sorts of songs that Slow Boat to China. I think it's the theme.
I feel like bossa nova is close, like the girl from Ipanema. I always have a sort of this exotic locale feel for that one.
No, yeah, you wouldn't think of the girl from Ipanema playing in a bar in Trenton.
That's for sure.
I'm sure it does, but it's not the image that comes to mind immediately. Um, no, I mean, there are, things like south of the border, down Mexico way. Even the idea of Adventureland at Disneyland,
Yeah.
which manages to combine Africa, Asia, and Latin America and the Pacific.
Yeah.
The tropics. That vague term. It's like the Indies, West Indies, East Indies. It's all tropical. They've all got monkeys, and there are weird spices and strange drinks. A little simplistic, much.
All right. Let's see here. Okay, another question from Connor. Totally apropos of nothing related to my first two questions. I've been reading a book called The Sayings of the Desert Fathers by Benedicta Ward, which I'm really enjoying and I highly recommend it. As the title implies, it has a number of sayings and stories attributed to the Desert Fathers, such as St. Anthony the Great, St. Basil the Great, Moses the Black, and many others. Could Charles please discuss the Desert Fathers, asceticism, and the Coptic people of Egypt?
Well, it was in the desert that monasticism first began. St. Paul was the first hermit, and St. Anthony was the first monk in terms of gathering other monks around him. This was the result, starting in Egypt, but spreading into the Syrian desert as well. This was the result of Christianity becoming legal. What happened was that, remember that before we became legal, just being a Catholic was illegal, and it was a death sentence if you were caught. So your whole life was a kind of mortification. All right, now we're legal. Well, some people felt called to a more heroic life, a more complete giving up of themselves than the comfort of a legal religion could give them. They wanted to give themselves more entirely to God. And that was what drew St. Paul, the first hermit, out to the desert, and what drew St. Anthony out there. In time, St. Anthony's rule became widespread in Egypt and Syria and Libya and places like that, and spread into Asia Minor. But it was very austere. They didn't eat much. They prayed an awful lot. They didn't sleep much. A very, very austere rule. And it had a big effect on Christianity, not just in Egypt with the Copts, but also in Syria. Now, the Coptic people were simply the pre-Muslim, the pre-Arab invasion people of Egypt. Copt comes from the word al-Kuft, which was the name for Egypt. And Coptic was originally just the latest version, the most recent form of ancient Egyptian. That was the way that that was the way that Egyptian civilization, as part of the Greek Hellenistic world, developed. Eventually, as Egypt became evangelized, you had a division between the very Hellenistic Greekified cities like Alexandria and all that, and the more Coptic countryside. Well, in the late 300s, or in the 400s rather, after the Council of, you had the rise of the Monophysite heresy, and after the Council of Chalcedon, you had a split in the church in Egypt and in Syria. Those who refused to accept the council, which was backed up by the emperor, went into schism. And they were the origins of the Coptic Church, the Syriac Church, the Armenian Church, the Ethiopian Church. Those who remained loyal to the church and to Chalcedon, because the emperor was one of them, they were called empressmen or royalists. And in Syriac and Greek, well, Syriac, I guess, is where we got it from, they came to be called Melkites. And these were what are now we call the Greek Orthodox in Egypt and Syria and all that. The Coptic Orthodox are the descendants of the majority in Egypt who became Monophysite. Interestingly enough, however, in the 19th century, there was a movement on the part of a lot of the Copts in Egypt to come back to Rome. Now, there was a problem. The problem was that Egypt by this time was ruled by the Ottomans, having become a primarily Muslim country after centuries of Muslim rule. And under the Ottomans, the different religious minorities, their leaders were also the secular heads of that minority and responsible to the Sultan for their governance. So the Coptic Patriarch of Alexandria, the head of the Coptic Church in Egypt, he was also the temporal ruler of the Copts. And for people to want to join with Rome, that was an act of treason against the state. But what helped settle the situation were Austrian gunboats. They helped convince the Turkish authorities that, in point of fact, they wanted to create a new category for Catholic Copts, who would also be a community like the Copts and like the Greek Orthodox in Egypt. And the Catholic Coptic Patriarch would be the head of it, the way the other two patriarchs were of their communities. It needed a certain amount of Austrian assistance for the local authorities to help them, see their way. Well, you'll understand this.
Yeah, sure.
Very, very often to help people who have difficulty understanding things, a certain amount of influence has to be brought to bear. Shoving them up against a wall, that kind of thing. Help clarify their thought.
Yeah, absolutely. As the as the great philosopher once said, I forgot his name, but you can get more with a kind word in a gun than just a kind word.
That's very true. And that's what the Austrians found out in dealing with the Turks in Egypt.
All right. All right. Let's see here. Last question from Connor.
All right.
He says, this final question struck me as you're discussing Rome and the Nabateans on the pre-show. So if you don't mind doing a little alt-history speculation, bear with me. Suppose Alexander the Great's empire didn't collapse. Maybe he even went to conquer land in the West. And thus, Christ is born into this Hellenic empire. In your estimation, how might have Christianity and the world been different in this scenario? Would Greek be the official language of the Catholic Church? Where would the Pope be seated? I'd be curious to know your thoughts on this imaginary scenario.
That's a good question. Hard to say, of course, but yeah, I would suppose that Greek would, in fact, be the language of the church. And if Alexander's empire had survived, his capital was Babylon. So it might be that the Pope would be at Babylon today. Which would be weird. Although the head of the Chaldean church is called the Patriarch of Babylon.
That's pretty weird. That sounds so weird because the city of Babylon evokes these different images, right? Like
Hollywood Babylon.
Yeah.
Although actually, I've never heard a more unfair title than Hollywood Babylon.
Oh, what is that in reference to?
Well, it's in reference to Kenneth Anger's salacious book, Hollywood Babylon, which gave the impression that in the film industry, from its very inception. There's been all sorts of badness.
That's terrible.
Well, of course it's terrible. Can you imagine? Basically, his notion was that a lot of actors and actresses and directors and producers and various other sorts of people did bad things.
Yeah.
Now, we know that didn't happen.
No. It didn't.
You know why we know this?
Why?
Because Hollywood was just a normal neighborhood where you might have Bob Hope living on one side and Elizabeth Taylor on the other.
Yep.
And, and you'd run into them at the market, and they were just normal people.
Yeah.
Yeah. There were no divorces, no adultery, no nothing.
Yeah.
But see, you have people like this Anger guy making attacks on my hometown of Hollywood.
It's just mean-spirited, honestly.
They are, and jealous. You'll find they all come from the valley. It's true. The people who make these charges, you bet, they're from like Panorama City.
All right. Moving on to questions from Helvicio, who says...
It's a Swiss name, if ever I heard one.
Is it?
Helvetio, yeah.
All right. He says, is Oliver Wendell Jones, Holmes, is Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. a damned Yankee from hell or a Boston Brahmin from heaven?
Both. He epitomized at once what was both best and worst in the Boston Brahmin. The learning, the wit, the amusement value on the one hand, and the smug self-acceptance on the other.
All right. I was reading a little about Charles Evans Hughs, Supreme Court judge and Woodrow Wilson's opponent in 1916. He seems to have been a very accomplished fellow. Is his political career worth studying, and how would history be different if he won the 1916 presidential election? I think that was a close race.
Well, it was. It was. I think Hughes was a very fine Supreme Court justice. He was the one that came up with the phrase, ask not what your country could do for you, ask what you could do for your country. JFK stole it, but it was Charles Evans Hughes who said it.
Wow.
So that kind of gives you an idea of the character of the man. I think we probably would not have gotten into World War I, for one thing.
Wow. Well, that's a huge... I mean, that changes everything, right?
Like it really does. Sitting where I am, it certainly changes everything. I think if Charles Evans Hughes had been elected president, we would have stayed out of the First World War. And I think that as a result, Europe would have fought itself to exhaustion, ending up pretty much where it started. And the world might be a happier place without the Second World War.
Okay, well, that's probably the biggest impact. What about some of these other things? Say, didn't Woodrow Wilson do a lot of banking? And didn't he start the income tax?
The income tax, the Federal Reserve, but that was all in 1912, so that already happened.
Oh, okay.
But we wouldn't have had prohibition, which Wilson pushed.
Why? Did he have some stake in some bootlegger or something?
No, he was a do-gooder and he was a Presbyterian and he thought it was bad.
I see.
But to be fair, there were a lot of Republicans who felt the same way. That's how they were able to get it through. But I don't think Hughes would have given us prohibition.
All right.
That would have been big too. I mean, for one thing, you and I would probably still be living in New York.
Wow. All right.
There'd have been no real reason or point to come out to
sunny California.
Yeah. Well, we probably couldn't have afforded it. Because let's just say that Prohibition was the start of many fortunes. And if those fortunes hadn't been started, lives of many people would be different. We'd still be fighting for scraps with the Manicotis back in dear old Queenston Heights.
Wait. Yeah, Queenston Heights.
I know, loose lips sink ships. Sorry, I didn't mean that.
Yeah.
It's not what I said.
I'm sure. All right. Final two questions for the pre-show. When did New England change from a Republican stronghold to a Democratic one?
Very good question. And the answer is over the course of the latter part of the 19th century. And the reason for this is demographic, primarily. Because New England, after the Civil War, was a staunch Republican stronghold, and the Republicans were the party of the Yankees. The Irish came over in huge numbers, and the Democrats recruited them. Well, the Brahmins, who were the more elite Yankees, the Yankees in general just didn't breed at anything like the rate that the immigrants did. And so by 1920, I'll say, only Vermont and Maine were still primarily Republican. Now, New Hampshire, oddly enough, later on would become a Republican state again, more having to do with the social conservatism element. But in the meantime, the Catholic vote had been pretty much sold to the Democrats, who have kept it nicely ever since. Just think of the Holy Father sitting on Nancy Pelosi's knee or whatever it was.
What do you mean?
Well, when she went to go see him and he gave her communion, he did the whole, well, you may be excommunicated at home, but I love you.
I don't watch the news thank you for exactly highlighting the exact news story why I don't watch the news. I don't need to hear that crap.
You are calling Nancy Pelosi, our co-religionists, communing with the head of our faith. You're calling it that crap. I don't know. I just don't know what to say.
I'm a happier person not knowing that.
Not knowing garbage?
Yeah.
That's odd.
I don't want to know that, honestly. It's too much.
Doesn't garbage make us happy? If it didn't make us happy, why do our masters generate so much of it, smart guy? Ha ha! You can't answer that one, can you? Exactly. If it weren't good for us, they wouldn't generate it out of their heads and mouths and other orifici.
I'm going to start a fight right now. This reminds me of something a Canadian gentleman said to me, where he said, all Americans, we like all this low quality trash food, and Canadian food is so high quality. All the ingredients are the best. And I responded, and I responded to him. I responded to him pretty quickly. I said, well, if that was true, why don't all these Canadian franchises just come down through the States and just dominate with all their high quality food? And it's like, oh, well, you guys are accustomed to low quality food.
Two words.
Now that,
Tim Hortons.
Tim Hortons. That is crap. I'm sorry. That's
why
Canadians,
it's the only one of their. That's just why it's the only one of their chains that have done well down here.
These Canadians have a certain snobbishness to Americans, and it came out right there. I feel.
But again, I would say the success of Tim Hortons in the United States proves his point.
Tim Hortons? What is that? What is that?
It's a chain. It's a fast food chain.
Where?
It's big in the northern United States, but it came down from Canada.
I actually don't even believe.
They don't have them in California yet. I mean, it's like the Dunkin' Donuts. We didn't have them 10 years ago.
Well, I guess that's true.
Yeah. See, you see Tim Hortons?
Tim Hortons,
Yeah,
fast food restaurant company.
told you.
Wow, almost 5,000 restaurants in 15 countries.
Uh-huh. But they're Canadian, and they've caught on wherever they've gone to in the States. That sort of proves your Canadian friend's point, I guess.
I mean, one single chain that's not even in California. I don't.
The fact that it's their least, everyone makes fun of Tim Hortons in Canada. The fact that it's caught on where it's gone to in the States is interesting.
Where have you gone to Tim Hortons? How do you know about it if it's not in California?
I've only gone to it in Canada, but let me see, where is it in the States? I know it's down here, but where? I mean, down there, I should say. Tim Hortons, USA.
I mean, but high quality fast food, isn't that a little bit of an oxymoron? You know?
I would have thought so, but it's in Michigan, it's in New York, upstate New York. You know what? I lie. I think I went to one in Buffalo. Yeah, they're in basically the Northeast and the Eastern Midwest: Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, New York, Maine.
Literally every review, like I'm on Google Maps looking at the reviews of all the Tim Hortons, and literally every single restaurant reviews, the aggregate review is under 4 stars. 3.8, 3.8, 3.6, 3.3, 3.1. Sounds like a coffee chain
right.
serving snacks and light fare. I just don't buy it. I'm sorry. Do better, Canada. Do better.
Hold on a sec. Well, I mean, I'd rather they said it's something nicer, but let's look at the menu, which is what really is more important to me than anything else. Let's see, menu. Oh, they don't want to tell me. I've got to actually find a location.
See? What are they hiding?
Well, hold on. We'll find out. I live in Buffalo for this. I was in Buffalo last year around this time. Really had a great time. I love Buffalo. Went to the old First Ward. All right. Main Street. Info order. Oh, it's not open at this time. All right, fine. 1 Scott Street. They're closing at 9 p.m. Great. Let's have a look at what they got.
That's amazing to me that they don't have a menu at all. Like you have to search the actual location.
Well, indeed. They've got featured items. What are those? Those are drinks, lattes, mango refreshers, coffee, mocha cold brew. That's fine. What I want is food. Bagels, breakfast, donuts and Timbits, lunch. This is what we want. Tuna salad sandwich, turkey bacon club, ham and Swiss, BLT, chili, panini, chipotle chicken bacon wrap, and chipotle steak wrap. All right, let's try Dearborn, Michigan. See if they're very different in Dearborn.
Look, there's no nearby locations in Manhattan, in New Jersey, and in California. End of story.
No,
so it's not.
They're all upstate in as far as New York goes. All right, looking at the menu. Lunch again. Yeah, it's all pretty standard. It's all the same stuff. Well, how about breakfast? Breakfast sandwiches, avocado toast. That looks kind of scary. Breakfast wraps, loaded breakfast wrap. That might be kind of nice. $4.99. Omelet bites. That's sort of scary. Loaded breakfast wrap. What do we got going here? Double sausage.
That sounds pretty. It sounds like something you can get from Jack in the Box. Honestly, Charles.
Yeah,
let's be real.
It's a Canadian chain. But it's like Jack in the Box. It's probably why they don't. Why we don't have them, because we have so many other chains in California.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was fun talking smack about Canada and their stuff.
I'm sorry. Say again.
That was fun talking smack about Canada and their aspirations. Yeah. So that's it for the pre-show. Oh, wait, actually, no. Excuse me. One last question. So
yeah.
So we're talking about Republicans in New England, and you gave us a lot of
Yes.
interesting information. So Helvetio closes with, "What else are you hiding from us about the Republican Party in New England?"
Well, I'm actually hiding a lot, to be brutally frank. The Republican Party in New England, I mentioned that the Irish led the sort of parade into the Democratic Party on the part of the breeding ethnics. This was not the case, however, in Rhode Island and southern Massachusetts, where the French Canadians and the Italians went Republican precisely because of their antipathy to the Irish. So you had kind of three layers. The Republicans are the party of the Yankees, so the Irish are going to show them and become Democrats. The Italians and the French Canadians arrive somewhat later than the Irish. They find that they've got everything sewed up in the Democratic Party, so they turn to the Republicans. And one of the crucial results of this was that the Democratic-dominated General Court in Boston put the highway right through the historic center of town in New Bedford, destroying all of the old whaling mansions on Water Street, including my grandmother's. Not that we're bitter.
Not that we're bitter.
But we don't forget. And if that weren't bad enough, the Bamboo Garden closed down. My favorite Chinese restaurant in New Bedford, home of the most excruciatingly delicious chow mein and chop suey sandwiches.
Watch yourself.
Yeah, I got it in. I got it in.
Did you just go on that entire route so you could get the chow mein sandwiches?
No, but when I realized I was going to be talking about Mamay's house being knocked down, I realized it was just a leap to the Bamboo Garden.
Oh man!
No, it really wasn't very far away from where Mamay's house used to be.
Hmm.
So thinking of the one, that made me think of the other. But despite the scumbags in Boston's best attempts, New Bedford still has the Maritime Museum, the Siemens Bethel, the incredibly beautiful St. Antoine's Church, French Canadian, oddly enough. Lots of great Portuguese food. Portuguese kale soup, French Canadian meat pie.
Hmm.
Yeah, New Bedford is still the center of all that is good and true in Bristol County, even though I'll be buried in the domains of their near rivals and neighbors in Fall River.
All right, that's gonna do it for this pre-show. So I'm gonna make a ruling right now. We're gonna go. We're gonna release this to the public, not just patrons, but it's sort of
the hoi polloi.
The hoi polloi. So I felt we had so much fun on this one. Let's release it to everybody. They've been waiting for a month. So it's kind of a nice little celebratory welcome back situation.
It must feel good to be in a position where you could be magnanimous. You must feel just so happy about that. Throwing a few crumbs of solace to the crowds. That must really, really make your day.
It does. But
believe me, considering how many horrible ways people in any kind of positions have to feel good, I'd rather it was doing something like this. Just so you know. Better to throw food to the masses than throw rocks at them.
Indeed. So if you're not a patron, if you had a lot of fun, you can have the pre-show every single week. Now, admittedly, so we went over an hour this week. It's usually around 30 minutes, 40 minutes. So it's not at this long, but
not usually.
Sign up, become a patron on Patreon for as low as $5 a month. You'll instantly get access to all the pre-shows, and I think we've like are approaching almost 100 pre-shows right now. So that's like 60 hours of content or something around there, something absurd. So the link to Patreon is in the description of the video. So.
And I'll just say also, if you enjoyed our horsing around, good.
Yes.
That's what the pre-show is all about. We kind of get it out of the system before we go on to the real show.
Yeah, where we get so serious.
Yes. That's true. Have you seen that wonderful video, Women Know Your Place?
What?
Yes. It's a takeoff on the old British pre-World War II mental hygiene films. Harry Enfield does it.
Wow, I gotta see this.
Oh, it's very, very funny. But at one point, there's a dinner party, and again, it's in black and white, sort of choppy film the way it was in those days. Look at this typical dinner party. Look at the ladies; they're delightful. They're having a pleasant conversation. Then it says, suddenly the conversation turns to more serious subjects. You see all the men suddenly go, they all become very serious, and that's how our transition is from the pre-show to the regular show.
There you go. All right, so that'll do it. But stay tuned for the full episode coming right at you.
We'll be with you.